Hey there, and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete, and today we complete another episode with the Cult of Jingz, who, after last week's events, are slowly but steadily heading towards another winter. And as a result of the temperature drop, hypothermia is actually becoming a bit of a problem, at least for Thoraya, which is why we are now switching out the wall here for another piece of solid wall, because for some reason the wall seems to insulate a little better against the cold, and so Thoraya can now put on some clothing for a change and warm up a bit at the research bench. Outside, meanwhile, Specs and Maniac are hunting some raccoons who are looking to grab a bite to eat from our animal stockpile, and instead of allowing them a snack, we are now turning them into one. In the meantime, our Anima Tree Dryad defense project also keeps going. As we can see, Reddini here continue the construction of our granite wall. In the afternoon then, we are hunting a boar that is looking to eat the raccoon that was looking to eat the deer, and so the circle of life in Livienna is once again going exactly one way, and it ends with Maniac on top. A few more boar are then taken out a few hours later, and shortly after Reddini finishes the construction of another medicine shelf in her bedroom, it is time for another ritual. After expanding our ideology with the pain is virtue meme in the last episode, we still have a few colonists awaiting their scarification, and so it is now time for the Tree Torment of Thoraya, who is once again back to her fully naked state. This time the scar is placed on her right arm, but again this does not actually cause any issues in regards to her productivity, and so another Tree Torment ritual eventually comes to a successful end. And this time Reddini delivers a satisfying performance, and so everyone receives a small +1 mood bonus as our colonists grab a bite to eat and then head off to bed. However, thanks to his legendary quality bed, Maniac is up again pretty early, and he begins his day by making kibble for our Muffalos, Shadow Mage, Tina and Lorps. After reading your comments on the last episode, by the way, I have decided that Lorps will stay with us for a while longer, and so Reddini can now construct a third animal bed. Now, producing enough kibble for the 3 animals during the winter, that could become a bit of a problem. Due to our shift towards pemmican, our rice supply has been more or less depleted already, so we might eventually have to feed our animals some meat in the form of simple meals. And at least in that regard, it looks like our meat supply will definitely not be an issue during the next few days, as we are now being informed that an elk has self-tamed, so let's quickly send out Coco to kill it and to add it to the stockpile. In the evening then, we have good news from Jagnar's small tailoring workshop, as the latest addition to our colony has just finished making a wolfskin leather armor. It is of normal quality and will now go to Tuk as one of our combat specialists, and at the very same time Jagnar also experiences a surgery inspiration, although I am not entirely sure if we'll be able to use that in any way. Nonetheless, with the first of our colonists now fairly well protected, both against enemy attacks as well as against the cold, I think it's time that we finish the day with yet another ritual, so as the sun slowly sets across the swamp, it is now time for Maniac's Tree Torment. As always, Reddini is the one performing the ceremony, and after scratching Thoraya on her arm, she now goes back to her usual ways for this, as Maniac receives a scar next to his left eye, and so our half-blind tree speaker of Jingz continues to pass on a symbol of her own limitations. Once again then, the ritual is considered satisfying, and once again everyone receives a small +1 mood bonus. And so, delighted by the pain they caused one of their companions, the Cult of Jingz once again heads off to sleep. On the following morning then, we continue to hunt, but to be honest, more for practice than for meat. With a double passion in his level 13 shooting skill, Maniac should quickly gain some good experience here, and hunting these small animals makes sure that one hit is enough to get the kill, and that Maniac does not have to hunt down an injured animal halfway across the map. The construction of our granite wall also continues, This time Reddini is building a section a bit further south, and while she does, we have another animal joining us. A rat has self-tamed and is promptly killed by Coco. By the way, Coco's animal skill is the main reason why we are not making her our plant specialist yet. That is a role that I definitely have in mind for her, but it would also render her unable to take care of any animal-related work, and at least for the moment we don't really have anyone else to replace her in that role. Still, Coco will be focusing a bit more on plant work in the near future, as we are now actually changing her Gowranland tree from bark skin to Woodmaker Dryads. This will now restart the Dryad production process of this tree, and I will get into the reasons in just a second. For now, we can watch as Thoraya and Maniac are celebrating their marriage. We did not actually put down a marriage spot for this, but they are choosing the only room that makes sense, I think. And so our colonists are now gathering in our small common room to marry the very first couple of the Cult of Jingz. And while that is going on, let's go back to the Dryads for a minute. As you may have noticed, our two Woodmaker Dryads, Kipsoy and Mixie, are really not in the best spot right now. In case of an attack, they are often our enemy's first target, and the other two Gowranland trees are also placed much closer to our base. On top of that, our Woodmaker Dryads are currently Spex's responsibility, and despite her solid plant skill, down the line I simply don't see Spex being able to prune that tree for 4 to 5 hours every day. Eventually, however, that is exactly what we want to do to keep up a steady wood supply, and not just to have enough wood to fuel our stove and to build a few walls here and there. So down the line, I think we ideally want to have at least 4 Woodmaker Dryads, and that takes a good amount of dedication from someone who doesn't really have that many other tasks in the colony, and after Tuk has now taken over cooking duties, Coco strikes me as the best candidate for it. So, with Maniac and Thoraya now officially husband and wife, we are setting our sights on even more Woodmaker Dryads. However, once Coco's Dryads start producing, we might as well switch Spex's tree to something else. All of that is still a few days in the future though, and for now another night has slowly set across the swamp. For a lack of alternatives, we have also gone back to cooking simple meals. I don't think we will have any issues collecting enough meat to last us for the winter, and once the temperatures are rising again in spring, we can then re-evaluate our food production for the next year. Now, on the following day, it is once again snowing as Thoraya finishes the research of smithing, and as a result, we are now able to construct ourselves a wood-fueled smithy, one more reason why we should probably increase that wood production in the near future. In the meantime, we are now going to unlock plate armor, which thanks to the vanilla expanded Viking mod also unlocks guardian armor, and both of those armors will probably be fairly important as long as we keep things Neolithic. With an intellectual skill of 6, Thoraya is also slowly growing into her role as a researcher, but that might also have something to do with the fact that it is really the only task she can do at the moment, as her nakedness is still somewhat conflicting with the outside temperatures. Still, Coco and her aforementioned plant skill of 12 are now preparing for the next ritual, and for that we want to move a couple of trees out of the way to make room for another kneel sheet. Constructor Reddini, however, is still busy on that granite wall of ours, and you can also see here the main issue that we are shortly running into, as everything marked orange here is swampy terrain that will not be able to support granite walls. The most we can do here is to put up some flimsy wooden walls, or perhaps leave the area open and fill it with traps, but once again that would require a good amount of wood or steel. While we still think on that decision, Thoraya has briefly left her warm shelter to put up that kneel sheet, and with that we now have a place for everyone to participate in the next ritual. Before we begin that though, we now want to give Thoraya our next piece of leather armor. This one, made from the heavy fur of a mega sloth, will drastically increase her temperature resistance, at least to a point where she should hopefully not collapse before the end of the Tree Torment for Coco. Coco is now actually the second to last colonist who has not yet received her scar. The only other person remaining is Tuk, as Jackna already joined us with an existing ritual scar last episode. Now once again Reddini stays true to her path and scars Coco's right eye, and if she keeps this up, that could actually lead us down an interesting road, as the logical jump towards something like the blindness meme is not too far away at this point. Still, for the moment, we are getting ourselves another satisfying Tree Torment ritual, and with that, another day in the Cold Bog slowly comes to an end. Now, on the next morning, we kick things off with Specs and Took, who are hunting a grizzly bear. Not necessarily because we need the meat, but because bear skin is a very good material for those leather armors, and over the next few days we still want to make a few more of those. While we're at it, Specs can also quickly shoot down another boar, and shortly after jump back to Jacknar, who has stopped the armor production for now, and is instead now working on 2 new steel visage masks. One will be for herself and the other one for Maniac, whose wooden mask has actually deteriorated to a point where it is now considered tattered apparel, so it's a good thing that Jacknar here now produces an excellent quality replacement. Just in that moment, we also have another quest to reach us, and as always, I would like to hear what you think about it. All that we know is that a 76-year-old healer is waiting to be rescued. We don't know exactly from what at this point, and looking at the map here, they are not too close to our base, so if we want to do this, we probably want to launch the rescue mission at the very beginning of the next episode. So let me know if that is something that you think we should do. In the meantime, we can watch as Reddini finishes the construction of a wooden trap, because yes, our base desperately needs a few more defenses. And those defenses will actually see some action soon enough, but not before we complete another ritual. It is time for the Cult of Jingz's final Tree Torment for now. At this point, Took is the only one without a ritual scar, so let's assemble everyone one last time and change that. And of course, I am half expecting Reddini to once again go for the eyes here. Surprisingly enough though, she doesn't, and instead chooses Took's right leg. Of course, Took is absolutely fine with that, and who's to say that this was his last scar? After all, the scarification precept still has room for us to ramp things up. For today, a spectacular Tree Torment finishes our ritual spree, and so, with a generous +3 mood bonus, another day in the swamp slowly comes to an end. On the next morning then, it is time to accept a quest that we received in the last episode, because now that everyone has their ritual scars, I think it is time we shift our attention back on our search for the Horn of Edmo. And this quest here will help us in that regard, as accepting it will cause a space drone to land at our colony, and we can now hack that drone to obtain more information about the Horn's whereabouts. However, as we send out Dryads to start the hacking process, an 8-hour timer starts ticking down, as we are unfortunately not the only ones interested in this drone. The sprouting of another Ranland pod might be a signal of good luck here, but in just a few hours a wave of tribespeople will arrive to attack the drone, and they will keep coming every 8 hours until the drone is either destroyed or we finish the hacking. And so, to prepare for their arrival, Reddini is now putting up a few more traps here, which we will probably have to relocate in a moment, depending on where our enemies enter the map. Still, Dryads has been hacking tirelessly and is actually more than 1/3 of the way there already, so as our first attack here is coming in, it is hopefully not followed by too many more. Our traps meanwhile are being relocated to a spot where our enemies may or may not run into them, while the rest of the colony is taking up defensive positions. Just a few seconds later, the fight begins, and we are now using Specs' new combat command ability. As our spirit chief, she can use this ability once every 10 in-game days, and so for the next 24 hours, everyone in that orange radius around her will have their combat abilities boosted. What that actually means is a +3 bonus to shooting accuracy and melee hit chance. I think that is roughly equivalent to 3 levels in the respective skills, and so especially for the more skilled fighters in our colony, that is nothing to scoff at. Nonetheless, as you can see, the fight is going moderately well. Our newlyweds, Maniac and Dryads, do unfortunately suffer a few injuries here, but at the same time, most of our enemies are also defeated fairly quickly. And so, Wave 1 is now defeated, but we are definitely not in the clear yet, and what's worse, both of our primary intellectuals in Maniac and Dryads are injured. Specs and Took then managed to shoot down another fleeing enemy, and with that I think only one more hostile will make it off the map, while Reddini is already administering some first aid to Kipsaw, who as always had to soak up some damage. Mixie, by the way, has actually disappeared for now, so we are down to one Woodmaker Dryad at the moment. The simple reason being that Specs may have neglected her pruning duties a bit, and so her connection strength fell below the 25% required to maintain 2 Dryads. So perhaps a little carelessness here on our part, but we are switching our Woodmaker Dryads over to Coco anyway, so I don't think it's going to cause too much trouble. Now, despite his injuries, we can see here Maniac has immediately continued hacking, because that next wave is coming and every second counts. Luckily, both him and Thoraya did not suffer any bleeding wounds, so they will heal on their own and, as far as I know, also without the risk of getting infected. By the way, we did also take the only surviving enemy as our prisoner, so that we can perhaps give the Cult of Jingz another execution once all of this is over. Unfortunately though, the next wave of enemies is already here, so the colony of Livienna won't get any sleep just yet. On the bright side though, we are only dealing with 8 enemies and all of them melee units, so I'm hoping that we will once again be able to emerge victorious without suffering any casualties. Now, as our enemies get closer and Thoraya stoically continues researching, we also learn that our prisoner's wounds have gotten infected. However, there is nothing we can do about that now, so let us instead focus on the fight. For this one, we want to use Spex's and Maniac's psychic abilities, Burden and Stun, to slow down the attackers, not only to give Thoraya a few more precious seconds to continue hacking, but also to thin out their numbers as best as possible, because if all of these enemies reach us at the same time, they can easily surround 1 or 2 of our colonists. And so, as things are now getting a bit too close for comfort, Thoraya has to interrupt her hacking. Instead, she will now join the defense in what is admittedly a little bit of a micromanage fight, so I hope you can forgive that the footage is looking a little bit choppy here, but spamming abilities and constantly changing who our target is can get a bit hectic at times otherwise. Now, for situations like these, I also think that we should use choke points a bit more in the future. One heavily armored fighter, like Took for example, equipped with a good melee weapon, can definitely hold their own in a fight like that, and if we put our archers in a good spot behind them, we should probably be able to avoid some of the injuries we took here. Nonetheless, I don't think there is too much to complain about here with this fight. Apart from Thoraya and Maniac, we only suffer additional injuries on Specs, and it definitely looks like we will emerge victorious here. And there we go, Wave 2 has been defeated. However, Specs is actually pretty heavily injured, and without medical attention she will die in just a few hours. The main reason for that could be the fact that she was just stabbed in the heart by a spear, so admittedly we are probably lucky that she is still alive. Thanks to Reddini's first aid, it also looks like it's going to stay that way, while Thoraya, by the way, has still not received any first aid and has instead immediately gone back to hacking. And thanks to her heroics, we might actually be able to finish the hack before the next group of attackers arrives. At the very least, we can now give her some rest and allow a patched up Maniac to take over. Unfortunately then, with only a few more points on the space drone remaining, the next wave arrives. However, keep in mind that they are not actually here to attack us, but instead their main objective is the space drone. That means we can now calmly sit back and watch as Maniac finishes the hack, and with that triggers the drone's self-destruction mechanism. So not only have we just obtained vital info about the Horn of Edmo, but the drone will also cease to exist in just a few seconds, and with that our attackers won't actually have anything left to attack. And there we go, as the drone blows up and unfortunately takes a few pieces of our storage room wall with it, the quest is considered completed, and as you can see, our enemies are promptly turning around and leave again. So thanks to the tireless efforts of Maniac and Thoraya, we did in fact get out of this with only 2 raids, and so I would say the 2 of them have more than earned themselves some rest. However, at least Maniac cannot simply pass up a chance to shoot something, and so, as Took goes on the hunt for an Arctic wolf, Maniac gladly joins in. And not only does this remove another predator from the map, but we also obtain some valuable wolf skin, once again a great source material for leather armors. Thankfully then, the rest of the day remains fairly uneventful. The base is slowly being cleaned up as Reddini repairs our storage room, and Maniac is then also the first of our injured colonists to make a full recovery. Now, the same can unfortunately not be said for our prisoner here, who, despite some first aid from Reddini, will likely not survive her infection. It is also pretty much impossible that she will be able to walk again before the infection kills her, and sadly, to perform an execution ritual, the prisoner does need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So I suppose that only leaves us with one option, and considering her dedication over the last 36 hours or so, I think it's only fair that the honor goes to Dryads, who can now take her longsword and put our prisoner out of her misery. The corpse is then immediately dumped into the river next to the others, and with that I think we have reached a very fitting end to today's episode. In the next one we might then embark on a small rescue mission, so let me know what you think about that quest we received earlier. And of course, if you have any other suggestions, then feel free to leave them down below in the comments as well. Now that brings us to this week's fanart showcase, starting things off with a piece by Luca Moth, and I have to say, I really appreciate that the renditions of specs are getting scarier by the week. It definitely reminds me that our colony leader is a bloodlusty psychopath, and that we should probably factor that into our playstyle from time to time. Submission number 2 then comes from fanart regular Doggo Doggy, who this week chose Tuk as their subject of choice, and I absolutely love to see some of the newer colonists get the respect they deserve here. After all, Tuk has kept the colony fed pretty much since his arrival, not to mention that his combat skills have probably played a big part in keeping everyone safe. Now the last piece this week comes from Tony Murchison, who has once again sent in something a little different. He did this already for Steak in our Extreme Desert series, and this time we have an amazingly detailed 3D render of specs. What's even better is that you can make your very own specs with this, because Tony was kind enough to upload the file to Thingiverse. You can find a link down below in the description and the comments, so if you want to have your very own 3D printed specs, then you can actually do that. The download is free, but Tony does have a Ko-fi page where you can support his work. I'll leave a link to that down below in the description as well. And I think that's it for today, so as always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.